Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Anthony Levinson, a psychiatrist at McMaster University, and I'm here today with Dr. Richard Sztramko, a geriatrician. And today we're going to be coming to you with our first live event about our iGeriCare initiative. And our goal today is to give you an introduction to iGeriCare, to talk a little bit more about some of the steps to being an effective caregiver of somebody with dementia, and to help to answer some of your questions. So we also look to get feedback from you, not only questions that you can post on our Facebook site, but also any feedback that you have on this live event or also on our resources on the iGeriCare.ca website. So a few housekeeping notes. We are going to keep the length of this live event to 30 minutes. And you will be able to see a recording or an archive of the video on our Facebook page, as well as on our iGeriCare.ca events page. Please post any questions or comments. We will try to answer as many as we can during the half hour. And any questions that come in that we don't have time to answer, Dr. Sztramko and I are going to try and respond to, and we'll make a separate video or answer on our Facebook page or on the website. So welcome, Dr. Sztramko.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Levinson.
I'm hoping that, Richard, you can tell us a little bit about some of what led to the creation of iGeriCare.
Definitely. So I'm a geriatrician, and I work mainly dealing with medical issues for older adults. And they'll come into the clinic, and commonly we encounter people that have thinking and memory problems that alter their function, and so they qualify as having dementia. And oftentimes I'll spend between an hour and 15 minutes assessing them, talking to their family members, trying to figure out what's wrong with them, and then I'll provide them with a diagnosis. Let's say I diagnose them with Alzheimer's disease, which is one of the types of dementia. After that, I only have 15 minutes to tell them everything they need to know about, what causes dementia, how it's treated, what tests do they need, how do you plan for the future, and how do you get access to the community supports you need, which is it's just not enough time. And so it's difficult to provide all the educational needs or provide for the educational needs that caregivers have. So that's frustrating for me, and it's also frustrating for the caregivers. It's frustrating for all of the other associated allied health that work in the clinic. So we really want to provide high quality, evidence-based educational content to caregivers. We know that the time constraints for caregivers are, they're very restrained in how much time they have. So we want to keep the information focused to high yield points. So, what do we see that caregivers are asking us for every day in clinic? And, we see a lot of people that have dementia. So what are the common issues come up? And how can we answer that in a curated resource? So instead of having to spend all of their time searching for information, they can find out what they need to know about where they're at in their dementia journey or their loved one's dementia journey very quickly and easy.
I think the other thing that we hear a lot is, it's so much information for a patient or their caregiver to take in as well. And depending on how much time you said is a resource, but even just taking in the volume of information when you may be receiving, difficult news about a diagnosis. So iGeriCare is really meant to help tackle some of those real-world challenges that we see.
So we also did a needs assessment in our clinic. We wanted to find out what people actually wanted, and so this is what the caregivers in our clinic asked of us. They said they wanted something that their healthcare provider is giving to them that's been vetted already, that they could trust, that's based on the most recent science. So that's the big reason why we created iGeriCare in the first place, was because the caregivers asked for it.
So, we're using this term caregiver, and when we're talking about caregivers, we're referring to informal family caregivers,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a lot of experience in the clinic. I have patient experience with caregivers. Tell us a little bit more about what we know about just how many people are informal family caregivers in Canada and Ontario right now.
Yeah, so there are over 500,000 people that have dementia in Canada and over 1 million people that are providing care to them through informal support. So usually, most commonly family members, spouses, daughters and sons, or potentially even more extended family members. And then also, even in some cases, neighbors or friends. And so it's not just family members, and it's not just an issue with support for family. It's support for the entire group of people that will support these people with dementia at home.
Yeah, it's definitely a community, and I guess it ties in a little bit with the other reason that we created iGeriCare and some of the resources specifically is it can be a bit overwhelming at times, not just the volume of information, but you think nobody gives you a manual. There's no, okay, so what do I do next? So the reality is that many family caregivers, whether they're family, friends, they become kind of extensions of the healthcare system.
Absolutely.
They provide very valuable health services and social meeting the needs of their loved one with dementia. So part of what we wanted to accomplish was some education and training, an overview, background information that could assist informal family caregivers to be the best caregiver that they could be. So it is a challenging job, and we hope that people find the resources helpful in terms of being able to carry that out.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, you could be providing care from 20 hours a week to 80 hours a week. And you don't get to choose when you provide care for the people that have dementia. It's an on-demand job. It's very challenging. It's very time-consuming, and also it's very complex, right? You're helping to provide functional supports for somebody on all aspects of their life. It could be, shopping and cooking, but also getting dressed or bathing and trying to navigate the healthcare system for many of their medical needs. So it's a very challenging job.
So let's talk a little bit, I guess, concretely about some of the main challenges that you're seeing when you're in the clinic. What are some of the main challenges that caregivers seem to be facing? And what are some, in broad strokes, helpful strategies that you would advise to caregivers?
Sure. I think a first challenge that we see is that people don't understand dementia very well. It's a complicated illness, and there are many different types of dementia, and they impact people in different ways. So when we say dementia or major neurocognitive disorder, a very complicated term, we're referring to an umbrella of many different illnesses, and they all have their different flavors, and they'll impact the personality changes or the memory and thinking changes that people see. And so a good first step is understanding the type of dementia that the person has, and then what you can expect them to progress, because it is a progress-like, because it's a progressive illness which will get worse over time. And I think that's a first step, is trying to find the appropriate diagnosis, and then trying to get better educated on the patterns of behavior or cognitive impairment that you may see.
I feel like in the past as well, sometimes it's almost like people might be given a diagnosis. Sometimes people are actually not given the diagnosis, but they are dealing with the challenges of the cognitive impairments. But it's almost like in the past, somebody was given a diagnosis and it's like it ended there. Whereas it's really the beginning of a journey. There are many, many people living lives with dementia, and that's part of the better somebody can understand as a caregiver some of the issues that they may be facing on that journey, the better. But I think that's important to know, that many people live for many years with a diagnosis, and some people may have milder forms, and their level of function will be different from people with more moderate or severe forms of the various dementias.
I think too, there's an issue around acceptance and understanding what what's modifiable in the process and what's not modifiable, right? And so oftentimes we'll see people getting frustrated with the person that has dementia about them not being able to do certain activities that they used to be able to do because their memory and thinking problems made it a challenge for them. So they might not be able to go out in public places that are loud or have conversations with many people in social networks or social settings that they used to before, and their partner may find that very challenging. But sometimes altering expectations around what they can and cannot do is the most important side of that, and understanding what's a modifiable condition and what's not. And we found that people that understand first, as we talked about before, what's happening to the person that has dementia allows them to accept certain things that they're no longer able to do, and help the caregiver understand that there's nothing to blame the person that has dementia for, and kind of move on with their life. And we find that helps caregivers decrease the amount of stress or frustration that they're experiencing.
I would agree. I think the two elements there of improving the understanding and a certain amount of acceptance can help to overcome the two things that we often see. One is frustration of the caregiver toward the person with dementia. Why are you not remembering this? I told you this. It's like, if you have a better understanding around some of the memory impairments, it can still be frustrating, but you may be more patient or less likely to get angry for something. And then the manner in which the caregiver may blame themselves for something that is beyond their control as well. I'm trying to get, to do activities with my spouse who has dementia, but if that person has a lot of apathy, and that means they don't necessarily feel motivated to participate, it's not the caregiver's fault that the person does not want to do these things. So the understanding, the acceptance are kind of at the heart of a lot of the topics that we cover, and we hope that they're of benefit. So. Before we move to the live questions in a minute, I just want to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors that really underpin the opportunity for us to develop the iGeriCare website and also host these live events and the other resources on the site. Funding is provided by the Canadian Centre for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, powered by Baycrest. Additional funding was provided by the Geris Centre through Hamilton Health Sciences, McMaster University, the Hamilton Health Sciences Foundation, the Alzheimer Society of Hamilton-Halton region, and our team from the Division of E-Learning Innovation are outstanding, and wanted to thank the McPherson studio here at McMaster as well for allowing us access to the studio today for this live event. Again, this video, the recording and the archive will be available through our Facebook page if you want to watch it later, and also through our igericare.ca/events page. So I'd like to move now to some viewer questions. And here's a very good question. Somebody's heard the term respite care. And can you describe, I guess, the circumstances around what is respite care? How might a caregiver take advantage of it?
Sure. Respite care, in simple terms, is taking a break, which is a very important, I think, learning point for caregivers of people that have dementia. So taking a break or getting respite can be provided in a few ways. One of those ways is that we have a community support organization. So in Ontario, we have the local health integration networks that will provide supports in home. And they can provide people to come in and stay with the person that has dementia for periods of time, so that the caregiver can go out and do things like, pay their bills or get their groceries or have some time to socialize, so that they take some time to themselves. And we find that that's so important. It's an issue that caregivers, I think, struggle with sometimes, in that they feel so responsible for the person that they're providing care for that they need to be there for them 24/7. And the problem with that is that it leads to burnout, where people feel that they can't accomplish what they need to, and they feel stressed, and they feel anxious, and they feel like they can't go on. They feel hopeless and isolated, and that is something that you want to avoid, because if you can't provide, if you're not feeling well enough to care for somebody, you're not going to provide them with the best care. So it's a bit of a challenging situation. The other way that people can get respite care is paying private services. So instead of government-funded public services, there are private services that, companies that will come in and provide the same service. So somebody will come to your house and stay with the person that has dementia so that the caregiver can get out of the house.
We have sort of an excellent follow-up question from a viewer in Oakville. What would be the proper time for a family? Like, at what point in the course of the illness would you need to sort of plan for extra supports? And what about decision-making, I guess, about long-term care? So, these are challenging questions, and they're going to be a bit individual depending on your family circumstances. But are there, in your experience and in terms of guidance, what do you see as some of those markers for having additional supports in the home or making decisions around long-term care?
Sure. So there are two broad categories of supports, and we talk about supporting somebody's day-to-day function in their environment, most often their home, whether that's an apartment or a house. The higher level or more complex functions are called instrumental activities of daily living. They include things like making a grocery list, being able to get yourself to a grocery store and find everything, doing your housework, paying your bills on time, being able to take your medications. And those usually require higher level processing from a brain power point of view. The other types of function are called basic activities of daily living, and that includes walking around, taking a bath, eating. So they're much more dependent on just kind of basic skill levels. And so we find that the families are the most often the people that are likely to take care of the higher level or instrumental activities of daily living. Until you get to the point where, somebody lives on their own and they don't have, family members. But if we're talking about informal caregivers, they'll most often be taking care of those. The further that the illness goes along and the more challenges people are having with their memory and thinking, they won't remember to take their medications, for instance. Somebody may be able to come and help remind them to take them or ensure that they're taking them. And then certainly when you get into the basic activities of daily living. So if somebody can't walk on their own, they can't make it to the washroom on their own, then that gets really challenging. You're more in a level where people would need nursing support. And then a few other things that we commonly see are when people lose control of their bowel or bladder function, then it's very challenging for people to take care of their loved ones at home. And then finally, behavioral problems. So dementia can be associated with changes in people's personality and behavior, where they'll get more violent, or they'll be screaming
calling out behaviors.
Calling out, yeah. There are many different forms. And
safety concerns.
Safety concerns, right. Yeah, so, somebody's wandering around, or, they can't cook on their own. They're forgetting pots and pans on the stove. And I would say that a lot of it has to do with the comfort of the caregiver.
Yeah.
And so, there's no hard or fast rule. We go from being, just needing a tiny bit of support to needing complete support. But we find that if there are behaviors emerging that are really challenging to deal with, people lose control of their bowel or bladder function, or they're needing help with their day-to-day supports, that's really when you're concerned. And I think people would be surprised at how much they can do to keep their loved ones in their own home or own environment with some basic supports from people like the LIN, or if you're in different provinces, whatever, there are analogous or similar home support organizations in those
and I
provinces.
think one of the follow-up questions from Oakville was who should I talk to, or what are the community resources? And I think this is where there are chapters of the Alzheimer Society nationwide, and they provide some talking with your family physician, or if you have a geriatrician or a geriatric team, they often have occupational therapists or people involved in home care, irrespective of the province that you're in, and they will often do an assessment of
Absolutely.
What are the needs. I think conceptually, sometimes people do maybe wait too long to look at those community or home supports. And the caregiver may then be burned out, and so they may be sort of very, very frustrated. And sometimes introducing care providers into the home actually can be helpful, and it may give a little bit of a break to the primary caregiver, and it may also introduce people into the home so that the person with dementia may become a bit more comfortable or used to the idea of supports.
Yeah, I think it's really important to introduce the concept of the occupational therapist, which a lot of people are unaware of what they do, but they do amazing assessments of each one of those activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living to find out what people need. And the worst thing I say to people that could happen is they could ask the LIN or CCAC or the public health support side of things for supports, and in many instances they're not needed initially, but you'll also be given a case manager in the community who will then act as a kind of a quarterback for you. So you'll have somebody to call that as things change or get worse and you may need more supports, then you can call them and ask them to come back and reassess things. A family physician or a cognitive specialist like a psychiatrist or a neurologist oftentimes will be able to fill out forms and ask for specific requests as well. So there's a few ways to go about it. And you mentioned the Alzheimer Society. So, going to the Alzheimer Society, there's an excellent program called First Link, right? When people are first diagnosed, and they can help you kind of outline the different strategies you can use for navigating the system. So just knowing that there are, multiple levels that you can approach this at within the healthcare system, especially so you don't feel alone and isolated. And it's complicated stuff. So, you need a team of people backing you up to really get the job done in the community.
And actually, we've had some comments from viewers saying that ongoing support, for one viewer anyway, through the Alzheimer Society, they found that to be an excellent kind of education and a link for helping them with their caregiver needs and linking with community services as well. So, in the iGeriCare lessons, we do talk about some of those community services. So there are sort of day programs or programs that will help to transport somebody to a day program, give them sort of stimulating activities, and also relieve a bit of the caregiver stress of looking after somebody 24/7.
I think that's really important, and this kind of gets to the concept of taking breaks. So we mentioned respite care before, and it doesn't always have to be, people coming into your home. There are different avenues. So people can drop the person with dementia off at a specialized care facility where they can stay for a few days or a week or a few weeks. And then you mentioned the day programs. And so, we don't want to be all doom and gloom about dementia. We do mention, a lot of the bad things that can happen, but people can still live very full lives in the meantime, right?
A great comment from a caregiver in Nova Scotia who said, my mom was diagnosed with dementia 2 years ago. She's not doing too bad. She's still going out dancing regularly.
Absolutely.
I think that highlights that.
And there are lots of warm stories like this where people are able to experience a good quality of life despite having dementia. So, for all the viewers out there or listeners out there, it's a very complex disease, and everybody's at different stages. So this kind of gets back to the point of having a team that can meet with you and understand your specific needs for where you are at as a caregiver at this point in time, and where the person with dementia is at that point in time. And getting back to the day programs again, it's like, I'll be amazed that people can be feeling sad and isolated and alone, and they'll just be stuck at home. And we do something very simple, get them access to darts, which will pick them up and take them in. And a few weeks later, after they've been getting out and, they play games and they can talk to people, and some of the day programs also offer exercise classes, they'll come back and it's better than any medication I could have ever prescribed for them. It's very low tech, low science interventions with high impact on the quality of life of the person that has dementia and the caregiver, because the caregiver gets a bit of a break too. So
we should specify that darts in Hamilton is
right.
the public transit. We're not recommending setting people up with cigarettes, are we?
Yes,
Dr. Sztramko,
no, or playing the game darts, yes, yeah.
So a very challenging question here that I think gets to the different life circumstances. This is from a caregiver who is working full-time, but also sort of the full-time caregiver for their family member with dementia. And, there's obviously no easy answer for these, but what are some of the other ideas that are sometimes helpful, I guess, in the setting where you may be the primary caregiver, but you're also working full-time and trying to juggle?
I think that's the hardest thing to do. The first thing I always tell people is to understand how hard their job is, because sometimes they're just going through the motions day to day and they think that everything should be fine and they're wondering why they themselves are feeling tired and burnt out, but it's a hard job to have. And I think you'd be surprised, not waiting too long to ask for help. Mm-hmm. And asking for help could be through the formal supports that we've talked about, your other family members or extended family members to give yourself a break, and even neighbors. So we find that, there are people that are willing to help out within the community, and all you have to do is ask. So if somebody's been wandering, for instance, telling all of your neighbors to keep an eye out for the loved one. And then certainly if there's a time crunch as well, seeing if one of the neighbors that has known the person for many years would just be willing to come over and sit with them so they're not lonely. People are reluctant sometimes, or we've talked about stigma a lot. They feel like they can't let people know that there are problems with memory and thinking, or that they feel too proud and they should be able to do everything on their own. And you just can't do it all on your own. You need to ask for help. You need to ask for help frequently, and you need to find help through formal and informal.
And I think, some of the questions coming through are, again, talking about the different circumstances. You may have the challenges of being a younger caregiver with a full-time job, but there are also challenges for some of the older or more mature caregivers who may have their own health issues, may or may not have mobility challenges. So, we've got a few other tough questions here as well, but so one of the questions here, again, going back to the issue around, is there an optimal time to introduce things or make a transition? This is a question about, is it easier to think about making a transition to a supportive living environment earlier rather than later? So that this was a dilemma that somebody was thinking about now, because they don't want to leave home. It's an older couple. There are issues, but they're sort of struggling with the timing of it. Would things have been different had they made some kind of transition earlier in the course of the illness?
Right. I tend to find that, we're all different people. Right? And we have different approaches. We have different approaches to lives. We all come from different backgrounds, and we have different values. And that's the thing I find challenging about answering questions like these, is that there's no specific recipe for any one person. The people that would tend to hold on as long as they possibly can and are of the more stubborn type, shall we say, you're not going to change their minds. They're going to be stubborn and hold on. And I think that's something that gets back to what we were talking about with respect to a modifiable set of circumstances or things that you can't change. And people's personalities, when they're stubborn, it doesn't matter oftentimes when they get demented. They may stay very stubborn.
It may get amplified.
Make it amplified. And so understanding that these decisions take time and they don't happen in any one day. Oftentimes you'll know when it's gotten to that point, and you'll be uncertain for a period of time, and then things will really start to go downhill, and you'll understand that that's the time to transition. Now, they mentioned, would it be easier if it happened earlier? Well, yes, it definitely would be easier for some people if it did happen earlier, but you just won't change their personalities. They won't accept it, and so you'll just be kind of up against a brick wall, and you won't be able to move it.
I guess depending
so acceptance
on,
in that situation is kind of a little bit more easy.
I guess a couple, in some circumstances, depending on your means and the region, there may be various levels of housing available. So that can sometimes work well if you have an older couple and they can transition, to sort of semi-independent living or supportive housing, and then to, a higher needs thing. But that's not going to be available to everybody. The other issue that is important to consider is the one around safety. So in this particular circumstances that the viewer was writing in, there may also have been some safety concerns. And I think there are certain things you can do, like you can unplug devices like stoves or ovens. You can remove them sort of from at the breaker. So there's certain kind of things, but if safety concerns are, the risk is just can't be tolerated at a certain point,
absolutely.
You may need to get other advice about that. So.
That's a great point. Yeah.
So we've hit the half-hour mark. Really want to thank you all for participating today. Any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, we're going to try to respond to either on the Facebook page or do another separate video. But would love it too if you would please take a moment to fill out a brief survey. There's a link in the comment section, and there'll be a link on the iGeriCare.ca event page as well. But it would be absolutely wonderful to give us feedback. Is this a good format? Are there other topics of interest? Any other suggestions to improve the live events and improve the iGeriCare resource? But it's been a real pleasure for Dr. Sztramko and I to talk with you today and answer some of your comments.